minutes.
Okay, 28 minutes and counting.
Time to kind of wrap. Is this thing on? Hi, everyone. My name is Kara Kenny. I'm with Call 6 Investigates, and you are part of history because this is actually my very first Facebook Live. And so what we are doing is we are taking your questions about investment frauds and scams. I have two guests with me. You can join the conversation with us. We have Mandla Moya with AARP over on this side. And on this side, this is Kelly Grease. Is that Greasy with the Secretary of State's office. And we are going to be taking your questions about investment frauds and scams. So if you're planning for your future, planning for your kids' future, planning for an elderly parent's future, this is the place that you can ask those questions. Now, we're not going to be taking any questions about your individual investments, so don't be asking, should I do this and should I diversify and things like that, because we're not going to be able to answer those questions. So maybe just to get the conversation going, Mandla or Kelly, you want to jump in and just tell us, are there any of the latest things that you're seeing in terms of how people are being scammed?
Yeah, I can answer that. I think one of the biggest things that we want folks to be able to look out for is sort of phantom riches, where somebody approaches you with a bigger than life opportunity, especially if you're able to make a little quick buck. Those are the opportunities that you want to be aware of, and kind of what we're seeing a lot of people go through.
Okay, that's interesting. So Jonathan, and okay, we have a question from Katie. It says, why are older folks often the target of scam artists? Can you answer that question?
Sure. It speaks mostly to just a generational thing about being more friendly and being more welcoming. I think they invite conversations or let conversations linger a little longer than they should. And so what we advise people, and I think the Attorney General's office and other folks as well, is if you get somebody who is calling you constantly, feel free to hang up and not answer, take any of those calls at all.
Yeah, the Attorney General actually told me the longer you stay on the phone, that's going to register as a hit, and then they'll sell your number. So if you get one of those calls, hang up right away. Okay, so Jimmy Brenner wants us to talk about the IRS scam. We are getting a ton of calls from people about the IRS scam. So Kelly, maybe you could talk about that.
Yeah.
Are you hearing about that in your office?
Yeah, actually, my brother got one of the IRS phone calls. So it is a big problem right now. A lot of people are getting calls saying, well, we're going to send officers to your home to arrest you if you don't pay this bill immediately. They get really threatening, a lot of these phone calls, and the goal is to try to get you to give money as soon as possible over the phone, but you just want to hang up on them, call and report it to the Attorney General's office. They're the ones who handle those specific complaints.
Gotcha. We got lots of really good questions coming in. Someone wants to know, we have Tyler Bradley, he wants to know, are you seeing a surge of cold call scams from India? Anything about overseas scams?
We just went and spoke at an event in New Albany this week, and a lot of the senior citizens that we spoke to there said the majority of the phone calls they're getting are for people with foreign-sounding accents. So that's pretty common. I've also heard from a friend of mine who is Indian, and he said that he gets a lot of these calls because his name looks foreign, and so people will call him with some kind of fraud or scam saying, you can pay us and we'll make sure your immigration status is okay. So there's actually a lot of threats to immigrants as well, or people who have foreign sounding names.
That's really interesting. Okay, so if you're just joining us, we're talking about investment frauds and scams as well as retirement. So we've gotten lots of questions that are now coming in. Ombre Mar wants to know what resources AARP has to help individuals avoid these scams. And then we also got a question from Danielle who wants to know, how to protect the elderly. So maybe Mandla, you could talk about that. What resources?
Sure. The biggest one that we really want folks to be engaging on is our Fraud Watch Network. So people can go on to fraudwatchnetwork.com, and they can sign up for watchdog alerts that will send emails and messages to them about the latest scams that they have going on. The best advice that I can give folks who are taking care of an elderly, be it a parent, a spouse, keep a watch on their finances. Have they talked about some stranger coming to see them or visit with them? Make sure that you are in communication with them regularly about what's happening around the financial issues as well.
So if Grandma says, some nice man came to the door and he offered me a fantastic opportunity to the tune of 300%, you might want to say, hey, Grandma, we need to have a talk. Good idea?
There's another element to that too I want to bring up real quick, Kara. talk to maybe your relatives, doctors about it. Sometimes they reveal a little bit more information to medical professionals. We also see that this is a medical issue, not just a financial issue for a lot of seniors. There's something called mild cognitive impairment, and it's a natural aging process of the brain, but financial decision making is one of the first problems associated with any kind of early signs of dementia. So you want to be paying attention to what's going on in the seniors' lives that are in your life.
That's a great idea. Never thought of that one. Somebody asked how can you block these calls? I think that's a great question. I actually would recommend going to the Attorney General's website. You can sign up for the Do Not Call list, but you can also, on an iPhone, you can hit block this number. There's many resources on the Attorney General's website as to how to block robocalls. So let's take a look at some of the other questions that are coming in. Evelyn Brown says, I'm getting calls about my credit card rate and getting a better rate. Can I stop these? They are coming from different numbers. I'm getting the same calls, so maybe can one of you jump in and talk about these types of calls?
Sure. It's really important when you're getting a call from a number you don't recognize. The first step we really want to encourage folks to do is to not answer, because if you answer, then you become part of that list that people can call on a regular basis. The second thing is that whenever somebody offers you something from, say, a credit card company or some insurance company or the IRS, feel free to verify that information, right? Call your credit card company and say, are you guys actually doing this? A lot of times they're not. Your credit card company a lot of times will not give you a call unless you owe them money on a bill that you're already paying on from your regular credit card information. So feel free to actually reach out yourself and call that whoever they say they're representing and find out if they're actually doing those kind of things in the community.
That's some good advice. And looks like Vera wants to know, it says they sold my mortgage from Bank of America to some greed tree, and now that company is in California. Is that okay? I don't know if either one of you are really experts on mortgages, but obviously that is one way that scammers can try to get your money, is by saying they've got some sort of deal related to your mortgage. Either one of you, can you talk about that?
Selling a mortgage is pretty common, that they'll sell it from one company to another. My suggestion would be to go to the bank that you originally got the mortgage through and say, hey, did you sell my mortgage to this company, to make sure that it's legitimate, that anything you're getting in the mail is realistic.
It says, how do you know who to, Deb Miller wants to know, how do you know who to trust when trying to invest for your retirement? And one of the resources that we were given by AARP is to go to cfp.net, and that will tell you if somebody is a licensed financial advisor. Correct, Mandela?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So
Anything else?
that would be a really good step. And then also, if they are a licensed broker, whatever products that they sell, those products are usually governed by some third party. So feel free to contact that third party and find out if those investments that they're actually selling are actually good investments. And then if you're thinking about investing, one of the things I would really encourage you to make sure, whenever you sit down and talk to somebody and they talk to you about an investment product, if all they're telling you is the good, then that's a kind of an indication that that's not a really good person to be sitting down with. A lot of times what financial planners will do is they'll talk to you about both the pros and the cons of your investment. So whenever you're sitting down and somebody sells you like this is the best thing ever, and they don't sell you or don't give you a negative, that's kind of a little hint to yourself that you can use whenever you're meeting with somebody about investments.
Yeah, you can also go to IndianaMoneyWise.com. That's the Secretary of State's website. We have searchable databases on there that allow you to look up any person in the financial services industry. Anyone who has a certain number of or a certain amount of money within their accounts, they are registered and they are licensed through our office, through the Indiana Secretary of State's office. If they have a lot more money in their holdings, then maybe the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, regulates them. But you can always check with our office. We recommend people do that before investing in anything. And you really want to make sure that you know what kind of investment professional that you're going to be working with as well. There are different designations. Sometimes people make up titles, and that's a big red flag too. So you want to know what kind of duty they have to. We call it fiduciary duty. Fiduciary duty means that an investment advisor is required to act in your best interest at all times.
Okay. And so if you are just joining us, we are talking about retirement fraud, investment scams. If you're planning for your future, ways that scammers can bilk you out of money. And tonight at 11, we're talking to somebody who lost like $160,000 because he trusted the wrong person. So we want to make sure that that doesn't happen to you. And if you're just joining us, we're taking your comments and your questions. And I've got two experts right behind me. This is Mandela with AARP, and this is Kelly with the Secretary of State's office. These guys are two experts, and they are here to answer your questions. So one person, Yvonne Hill, says, when I answer, they always hang up. My calls come from California and from Texas. And we recently spoke with the Attorney General's office, and that's actually probably a good thing that they do hang up, because if you continue to talk to them, that will register as a hit, and they will sell your number to different scam artists, different companies, and you'll get even more and more phone calls. So probably one of the best things that you can do is to hang up the phone. So we're still looking for some more comments and questions. What questions do you all have about retirement scams, frauds, how they investigate? Maybe you could just talk a little bit about, while we're waiting for some more questions to come in, what is the protocol in place in terms of investigating this type of fraud? Does it usually start with a tip from somebody in the community?
Yeah. The first thing is, if you suspect that you're being taken advantage of, or someone you care about is being taken advantage of, call our office. You can look us up on IndianaMoneyWise.com, find all of our contact information with the Secretary of State's office. Go to our website. You can file a complaint online. You can find the phone numbers on there to contact our investigators directly, and they will start looking into your claim to see if it's legitimate and if they need to move forward. If it's a serious investigation, it gets to the point of a prosecution state, then we work with prosecutors all throughout the state of Indiana to make sure that the people who rip off Hoosiers are sent to jail, hopefully, for it.
Oh, we got a great question from Pam Rosenberg. It says, can you discuss bank and financial emails that look legitimate but actually have fake links in them and that lead you to sites that steal your login and personal information? Mandela, how about that one?
Sure, that's a really great way that a lot of scammers are getting to folks, because they will legitimize their email. It'll say Bank of America or whomever, and you will click on a link, and that link will actually let out a virus that will then be able to, a lot of times it's for identity theft. They'll be able to pull a lot of your personal information from your computer. What we advise, again, is that if you think you're getting an email from your bank or whomever, or financial institution or Microsoft or whomever that email is coming from, it's really important for you to go to that particular website. Don't click from your email. Go to that particular website, and then just verify. If you have a great relationship with your local bank or your banker or your financial institution, feel free to call them up and ask them, is this a promotion that you're doing? Is this a giveaway that you're doing? Then those things will go about protecting yourself from being scammed or being taken advantage of.
So Ren Anthony asked about something that I'm not familiar with. It says, how can a business stop Google placement calls? We can't go on the do not call list. Do either one of you know anything about Google placement calls?
I'm not familiar with that. That might be something that you address to the Attorney General's office.
Yeah.
Look them up online, and you can find their contact information on their website to ask them about it, because that sounds like it would be a consumer fraud situation you'd want to address to them.
Yeah, Karen Vanderpool O'Keefe says, when I get a phone number I don't know, I will look the number up online and it will tell me if others are getting it. I think that's probably a good idea. I often do the same thing. If I get a phone call, I'm like, what is this? Because let's face it, a lot of these calls do sound legitimate, and I get a lot of calls from, like, for example, I go to my dealership to get service, and then I get a survey, and I'm listening to figure out, is it legit or not? It can be very confusing. So always a good idea to Google the phone number, see where it's coming from. Chris Kidd Johnson says, how do you stop calls about credit cards when I don't even have any? That's a good question. So if you're not interested or don't have any credit cards, is there a way you can completely stop those?
Sure. I think the first step, I think we want to make sure that we reiterate this point, is that don't answer a call from a number that you don't know. The second thing is, I think Kelly also mentioned this, is that get on that do not call list. That's really important. Now you want to make sure you get on the state for Indiana, and then you get on the federal do not call list as well, so that protects you from numbers. And a great way that I learned how to differentiate if somebody's really conning you or being a scammer is that if they call you after a certain hour in the day and they have an offer from you, usually they're doing something that they're not supposed to do. A lot of folks respect the do not call list, and then they respect some of the laws that have been put in place to protect folks from getting scammed, especially if it's getting calls late in the night from somebody saying they're from an official business. That's usually an indication that that's not who that person is, or who they claim to be representing as well.
That's a really good point about the do not call list. And people who still call you once you're on the do not call list, they're usually con artists because they're already violating one law in making that call. If they don't have a business relationship with you, most legitimate businesses respect the do not call list and they know that they shouldn't violate it. So if someone's still calling you, they're probably a con artist.
Oh, fantastic. Yvonne wants to know, do the do not call list follow you when you move out of state, even if you have the same number? I'm going to go ahead and guess that the federal probably does transfer, but if you move to a different state, it would be a good idea to sign up for that state's do not call list. Am I right?
The phone number is, if the phone number is still the same, like your cell phone number, then I don't think you have anything to worry about. It should still be valid.
Okay, fantastic. Kim Maddox Humbarger wants to know, what about a call from Africa saying a family member died, you inherited millions? I mean, this is really one of those scams that never seems to go away. Am I right?
So we talk about this in our Fraud Watch Network. Again, we talk about this whole idea of ether, right? What a con artist's goal is to get you to respond in some way. Whether I want to get you really excited about something, so there it is, that $1 million lottery that you won in London or Nigeria or wherever. That's something for me to cause you to react. So remember about being in a heightened emotional state. Make sure that whenever you read something, that old adage, if it sounds too good to be true, it usually, most of the time, usually is. So just be careful about those kinds of emails or calls.
Yeah, one thing that is just amazing to me, and I'm sure it is to you, is people continue to fall for these things. Can either one of you maybe talk about why is it that people fall for these? Is it, like you just said, people get in that emotional state and they're just not thinking rationally? Or why do people fall for this?
There's two really strong emotions that happen, especially with those kind of calls of saying you won money. Number one is it's almost like the fear of missing out kind of thing, FOMO. You think if I don't invest, I lose all of this money, and then once you do put money into it, then you're afraid you're going to lose that money. So it's this fear of missing out on something, or this fear of being scammed. There's a lot of these scammers, they really prey upon your emotions. That's what they do for a living. This is their job. Ripping people off is their job. They get paid for it. And so they're very good at what they do because they've trained for a long time to do it. They know that if they talk to somebody, possibly they've got some information on you elsewhere that says maybe what kind of income you have. So they're looking for people maybe who would get really excited about this sort of windfall of money. But just be careful to not let your emotions get the best of you when working with, if you get these kind of calls.
Hey, everybody wants easy money. We all want easy money, but you really have to be smart. And like Mandela said, you have to watch out for your parents or your grandparents, because if they're dealing with dementia, Alzheimer's, things like that, they're not going to be thinking rationally. Deborah Graham Livingston brought up something that we brought up earlier in the conversation, but if you're just joining us, she says that she had the IRS supposedly call and said that they were going to do something, and then they hung up. So the IRS scam is a huge scam right now when it comes to tax time. So chances are the IRS isn't going to be calling you.
Yeah, they're not likely to call you. They're definitely not going to threaten you. And if you do owe money, then just hang up the phone and actually reach out to the IRS and say, I got a phone call, was it you? And then work with them. I used to get phone calls from people all the time who said they were with Sallie Mae when I had a student loan, claiming there was a problem with my student loan. It was never actually Sallie Mae calling. I got these phone calls at least once a month. Every month, just to make sure, I would still look up the phone number for the actual loan company and call them and say, is there a problem? They'd say, no, this is a known scam.
Yeah, and then just to follow up on that, one of the things that if you do have a debt out there that you owe, the individual that you owe a debt to, if somebody's saying they're from IRS or Sallie Mae or from some credit card company, most of those individuals have a way that you can rectify that. If somebody is pressuring you to pay immediately, or you're going to go to jail, or they're making you angry, you should really know that that is not how the business operates, right? So if IRS says you owe a tax bill, there's always a way to rectify that. I'll use myself as a personal example. I owed a little bit on my IRS. They sent me a nice thick letter explaining when I made the mistake, how I made that mistake, and they were able to get me on a payment plan, and I got off of that. Nobody threatened me. Nobody came to my house. Nobody said they were going to call the sheriff's department on you because you owe a bad IRS bill or a student loan. It impacts your credit, but ultimately you should find a way to rectify that issue.
And there are laws that debt collectors have to follow, legitimate debt collectors. So make sure you look up those laws online. I believe it's at the FTC's website. The FTC's website has a lot of really good information on it about the rules that debt collectors have to follow, when they're allowed to call you, what they're allowed to say, and what your rights are when dealing with them. So make sure you check that stuff out if you actually do have debt, so that you aren't getting harassed by someone who's an illegal debt collector.
Well, if you're just joining us, we have just a few more minutes to take some more questions. So we're talking about retirement fraud, investment schemes, any way that you're really planning for your future. And that could be if you're planning for your children, or you're planning for your parents, or you're planning for yourself. We have two experts here that are taking your questions. So we want to hear from you. We've had a ton of really good questions. And tonight at 11, we have a story about this very issue. One of the things that I found when I was doing this story is we had a heck of a time trying to get a victim to go on camera, because people are so embarrassed about this topic. Nobody wants their friends and their neighbors to know that they have been ripped off. Is that something that you two see, that people just don't want to talk about it?
Yeah, embarrassment is very common. It's not just that they won't go on camera with you. Sometimes they won't even report it to our office and say, I've been a victim of this. They're afraid to rat people out. One of the biggest reasons we see this happening is with affinity fraud. That's when there's some kind of common bond between the victim and the person who is ripping them off. They are afraid to report someone who's part of their circle of trust, somebody who's in their church or in a group that they belong to. They don't want to report someone that they know and feel like is a good person, even though they got ripped off. So it's really important, though, that you remember, again, these people are professional con artists. This is what they do for a living. They're very good at it. They're very good at manipulating your emotions. And so you want to make sure that no matter what, you are not embarrassed when you fall victim to this. It happens to everyone. It happens to CEOs of companies. Bernie Madoff had a lot of celebrities who were victims. These are people who are intelligent, who have a lot of money sometimes, who fall victim to it. So you shouldn't be embarrassed. You should definitely report any kind of fraud that's committed against you.
And speaking of Madoff, make sure to watch the rest of Madoff tonight on ABC and watch our. Yeah, I think Richard Dreyfuss did a fantastic job. What do you think?
I really liked the first half of it. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna wrap this up. So thank you so much for all your questions and your comments. Mandela, do you want to say any parting comments or advice for people?
Sure. Really quickly, if you want to get on the Fraud Watch Network, please.
I signed up. It's good stuff.
It is. Log on arp.org/fraudwatchnetwork. You can get alerts about the latest scams that are happening in your community. Feel free to utilize, solid resources like our friends at the Secretary of State's office, the AG, and if you live here in Indianapolis, the Marion County Prosecutor's Office. They do a really, really great job in protecting us from these folks as well.
Yeah, same as he said. Really, just make sure that you know who the good resources are in your community. For senior citizens in Central Indiana, SACOA is a really great resource. They can connect you to all kinds of great people who are care providers, and as well as legal resources, things like that. They can connect you. They're a really good network for that. And as I said, if you are considering investing with anyone, please visit IndianaMoneyWise.com before investing to make sure that the professional and the product are legitimate.
Some fantastic advice. Thank you to everyone who logged in for our Facebook Live. My very first Facebook Live. Yay! Well done. Thank you to my experts, and we'll talk to you guys soon.